They're generally made bigger, more powerful, stronger, whereas for women we're usually made frailer, smaller, less powerful. But more important, there really aren't consequences for men as a result of objectification. There are some consequences for boys. I think they're encouraged to use steroids to try and beef up in that way. But in general, men don't live in a world in which they're likely to be raped, harassed, or beaten, whereas women and girls do. So when women are objectified, there's always the risk of danger of all kinds of intimidation, sexual violence, and women live in a world really defined by this threat, whereas men simply do not. So the objectification has very different meaning for women than for men. However, a much more serious problem for men, I think, is that men are so often portrayed as brutal, as violent, as perpetrators of violence. Here an ad for Jeans featuring a gang rape, and she's the victim, but the men are the perpetrators. So boys often grow up surrounded by images of men being violent to women and being surrounded by images of men being violent as a sort of prerequisite for being masculine, and in which boys themselves are encouraged to be tough and insensitive starting at a very early age. You talking to me? Well, this is a joke, but this is also a baby, as is this. And boys really still get the message that it's not safe to express their feelings, that they need to develop a very tough kind of veneer, which does enormous harm to boys and ultimately to men. Enormous harm, physiological harm as well as psychological harm. So the image of men is distorted too, although in a very different way from the image of women. But the negative image of women deeply affects not only how men feel about women, but how men feel about everything that gets labeled feminine in themselves. And this to me is a very important point. Now, this is an old tobacco ad, but he says, "You're looking at my feminine side." And clearly he's talking about the girly tattoo on his bicep. But what this ad is saying, and this is a tobacco ad that's targeting teenage boys basically, is saying you better not have a feminine side. There better not be anything about you that could be considered in the least bit feminine. So what boys learn is not only contempt for women, but contempt for all things considered feminine, for human qualities that could divide it up, and some are considered masculine and some feminine, and the feminine are consistently devalued. And by that I mean qualities like compassion, cooperation, nurturance, intuition, qualities that we all need to develop, but boys are quite rigidly socialized to repress these human qualities in themselves, which does enormous harm to all of us. And advertising is one powerful force that keeps us trapped in very crippling definitions of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. And these definitions of femininity and masculinity inevitably lead to sexual assault and other forms of violence. There's been something going on for a while that I call the romantic stranger. And in these ads, the woman is outdoors alone, there's a shadowy figure lurking in the background, and always the idea is that a romance is about to take place. Let the adventure begin. I think I speak for all women here when I say that when I'm outdoors alone and a shadowy figure is lurking in the background, romance is the last thing on my mind. And yet we get ad after ad like this where it's supposed to be sexy, and what this does is it eroticizes violence, which is the most dangerous thing you can do. It's bad enough to see a lot of violence, and the research is clear, it does affect us, but it's even worse when sex and violence become intertwined in this way. Wear it out and make it scream. This could be a seduction, but it could as easily be an assault, and is certainly unnerving when you can't tell the difference. Many ads imply that women make men lose control, so it's ultimately men's fault, as in this commercial.
The world is facing one of the biggest crises in the history of history. Girls are getting hotter and hotter. This is causing guys to lose their cool. It's happening everywhere. That's why the people at Axe have developed the new Axe Chill collection. It helps guys keep their cool before it's too late. Girls are getting hotter. Keep your cool with the new Chill collection from Axe.
Some ads normalize and trivialize battering, and battering is the single greatest cause of injury to women in America. More women are injured every year by being beaten by the men they live with than by all car crashes, muggings, everything else combined. And that's a terrible fact for all of us. for men as well as for women, but until we face it, we're not going to be able to do anything about it. The truth is that most men are not violent. Overwhelmingly, most men are not violent. But many men are afraid to support women, are afraid to challenge other men. And not surprisingly, it takes courage to do that. But more and more young men in particular are stepping up these days, and I have great admiration for those who do, because we will not solve this problem until men get involved as well. Some ads seem to depict murder, and these are for very high-end products, and murder. A third of all women who are murdered in this country are killed by their husbands or by their male partners. So to joke about this is reprehensible. And of course, there's a huge amount of violence in music videos and films and TV shows, and everywhere we look, there's a huge amount of violence against women. So, of course, as I said, ads don't directly cause violence, obviously, but images like this, images that turn women into objects, do create a climate in which women are more often to be seen as things, as objects, and this makes them more likely to be assaulted and to be victimized. The Me Too movement has revealed the incredible extent to which women are harassed and assaulted in every field and in every level of our society. So it's out in the open in a way that it wasn't before, which can only be a good thing, ultimately, for all of us. So what can we do about all of this? The first step is to become aware of it, pay attention, to realize what's sort of going on, sort of almost invisibly around us, and to see that these issues are really public health issues. These affect all of us. The obsession with thinness, the tyranny of the ideal image of beauty, the violence against women, the rigid socialization of boys, all of these are public health issues, and they can only be solved by changing the environment in which we live. So we need a lot of citizen activism, education, discussion. We should be teaching media literacy in our schools, and we need to work together to change the norms. So people often ask me what gives me hope, given how long I've been doing this, and given the fact that in many ways the advertising has gotten worse. However, what primarily gives me hope is that I'm no longer alone. I was when I started out, and now there are countless films and books and organizations, and many of them are on my resource list. So many young people, men and women, are getting involved, and that gives me hope. And there have been some signs of progress around the world. I showed Killing Us Softly 4 to Parliament in London about 3 years ago, and they've come out with cracking down on gender stereotypes in ads through some legislation. In France now, there's a Photoshopped images have to come with a warning. So there's been changes in this way. It's through public policy. Not long ago, Mattel came out with a whole new range of Barbies, which is pretty incredible, really, but something I never thought I'd see. That doesn't solve the problem, but it is a step in the right direction. And of course, we need to teach media literacy, and we also need to have counter-advertising, and that means advertising that gives us a different kind of message. And that was incredibly important in taking on the tobacco industry. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a time when there were billboards like this all over California, for example, that where a picture could be worth 1,000 words, and this is counter-advertising, and that made a big difference in getting people to no longer think that smoking is cruel. And it's trickier with these issues, but it's not impossible. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of some counter ads, or more positive ads, if you will, that have run in the past few years. The first one was shown during the Super Bowl about 3 years ago, and I think what's most astonishing about this is that it was shown during the Super Bowl.
Hi. Okay, so I'm going to just give you some actions to do. The first thing that comes to mind. Show me what it looks like to run like a girl. Here. Show me what it looks like to fight like a girl. Now throw like a girl. Aww.
My name is Dakota, and I'm 10 years old.
Show me what it looks like to run like a girl. Throw like a girl. Fight like a girl. What does it mean to you when I say run like a girl?
It means run Actually, don't know what it really is.
Sorry.
If it's a bad thing or a good thing. Sounds like a bad thing. Sounds like they're trying to humiliate someone.
So when they're in that vulnerable time, between 10 and 12, how do you think it affects them when somebody uses like a girl as an insult?
I think it definitely drops their self-confidence and really puts them down because during that time they're already trying to figure themselves out. And when somebody says you hit like a girl, it's like, well, what does that mean? Because they think they're a strong person. It's kind of like telling them that they're weak and they're not as good as them.
And what advice do you have to young girls who are told they run like a girl, kick like a girl, hit like a girl, swim like a girl?
Keep doing it because it's working. If somebody else says that running like a girl or kicking like a girl or shooting like a girl is something that you shouldn't be doing, that's their problem. Because if you're still scoring and you're still getting the ball on time and you're still being first, you're doing it right. It doesn't matter what they say. I mean, yes, I kick like a girl and I swim like a girl and I walk like a girl and I wake up in the morning like a girl because I am a girl. And that's not something that I should be ashamed of. So I'm going to do it anyway. That's what they should do.
If I asked you to run like a girl now, would you do it differently?
I would run like myself.
Would you like a chance to redo it?
Why can't run like a girl also be in the race?
Now, you might wonder what this has to do with a maxi pad. And of course, not much, but I think what's important that
Think you
these
run out
ads
of
get
space.
criticized sometimes by people
Run out
saying
of
that
space.
it's all just about
It's
public
like,
relations,
think
and
you
that
run out
may
of
be true.
space.
I don't care. What I care about is that this ran